Your daughter cheated on my son.
Karen, Sandra's mother-in-law, yelled angrily.
Sandra would never do that.
I desperately defended Sandra's innocence.
Then how do you explain the baby's eye color?
I had no response to that. Sandra was in the corner of the room, holding her baby and crying. The baby in Sandra's arms had blue eyes.
Take her and get out. And later, you'll be paying a hefty sum in the divorce settlement.
We were miserably thrown out. But I was certain Sandra wasn't lying. So, I decided to do a DNA test. When the results came back, Karen and her family realized their mistake. And from there, their lives quickly spiraled downward. My name is Carol. Today was a special day, so I was more enthusiastic than usual. On the table were potato salad, meatloaf, and tomato soup. These were all Sandra's favorites.
It looks so delicious. Thanks, Mom.
Sandra's smile made me so happy. From the large TV in the room, cheerful voices played, and the warm light filled the room. The girl in the painting on the wall seemed to be smiling in celebration for Sandra. Don't hold back. Tomorrow's the big wedding day. Sandra lowered her eyes a bit at the mention of the wedding. I wish Dad could be here. My husband, David, is currently working overseas. It wasn't originally planned, but he had a connection to that country and volunteered for the assignment. However, his work there has been full of troubles, and he couldn't make it back for Sandra's wedding. It's disappointing, but I didn't blame David. He earned the money for this house and Sandra's tuition.
Well, Dad is busy. I'll take lots of pictures to send him. Thanks. I really wanted to live together, but William wouldn't listen.
William is Sandra's fiancé. At his strong request, Sandra would be living with his parents right after the wedding. He's a good man, but without his dad around, he's a bit of a mama's boy, isn't he?
Yes, that worries me, but he's a good person.
Sandra blushed slightly. We wouldn't have many more meals together like this. So, I needed to enjoy this moment. But I had one nagging worry.
But Karen seems kind of strange. I'm worried about living with her.
Karen was William's mother. I first met Karen at a family meeting, but I didn't like her from the start. She was small and thin, her short hair mixed with gray and unkempt. She always had her eyes wide open, which made her seem eerie. Her words also revealed her nervous personality. I was worried about Sandra living with someone like her.
Don't worry so much. We're close by, so if anything happens, you can always come here.
Sandra smiled as she took a big bite of the meatloaf.
Yes, if you need anything, I'm always here to help.
We cut the ominous talk short and spent the rest of the time reminiscing and enjoying each other's company. The wedding went off splendidly, and before we knew it, 6 months had passed. Fortunately, their married life had no major issues, and since living alone was lonely, I started a part-time job. One sunny day, while I was cleaning the house, Sandra came over. She hugged me as soon as she walked in the door.
Mom, I'm pregnant.
Her eyes were shining as she said it. I was thrilled at Sandra's happy news.
Congratulations! Did you tell William? He must be so happy.
When I mentioned William, Sandra's expression suddenly stiffened.
Sandra, what's wrong?
When I looked into Sandra's face, she quickly put on her usual smile. Nothing, it's just... I have a favor to ask. Sandra's demeanor worried me, but I had to hear her request.
A favor? What is it?
Sandra hesitated, lowering her eyes, but then looked me straight in the eye as if making a decision.
I'm nervous about giving birth. I want to stay with you.
I was taken aback by Sandra's unexpected request. I had imagined something serious, thinking it was beyond my control.
Oh, if that's the case, there's no problem. Stay as long as you like. Thank you.
Sandra seemed relieved, exhaling deeply. I wondered if it was okay not to tell Karen, but I assumed Sandra had informed William. However, I soon learned why Sandra's expression had clouded. Sandra quickly packed some basic items and came to stay with me, but soon after, William came over.
Oh, hello. Is something wrong?
William didn't respond to my question, standing in the doorway with a pouty expression. I didn't know what to do and stood there awkwardly until Sandra appeared.
What are you doing here?
Sandra's words made William finally lift his head.
Mom told me to keep an eye on you since you're at your parents' house.
William pouted like a sulking child.
But I explained everything.
Why did you follow me? Sandra seemed exasperated by William's actions. They argued for a while, but in the end, William ended up staying at my house. He hadn't brought much, so we had to buy a new toothbrush and underwear for him. Even though he was Sandra's husband, having a man suddenly living in the house made me uncomfortable. Sandra also seemed to find William a bit annoying, but he didn't cause any particular problems. Thus, without any major incidents, we settled into a smooth routine. Sandra was admitted to the hospital for childbirth, and William went back to his in-laws' house, so the house became quiet again. I realized for the first time in months how lonely it is without Sandra's morning greeting. To distract myself from the loneliness, I put extra effort into getting ready for work. Just as I stepped out of the house, my neighbor greeted me kindly.
Oh, Carol. Thank you so much the other day, you really helped me out. It's nothing. I'm always here if you need anything. Everyone in the neighborhood appreciates you. If you ever need help, just let us know.
I felt my face flush with a mix of happiness and embarrassment.
Thank you. I'm off to work now. Good luck.
I often helped out my neighbors, so it was common to receive thanks like this. However, I felt embarrassed because I thought I was just doing what was expected. Besides, everyone was so kind and gentle that I never felt like I was at a loss.
All right, time to get to work.
I shifted my focus and headed to my workplace. Just before my lunch break, I received an emergency call. It was William.
Sandra's contractions have started.
Please come quickly. Feeling a sense of unease at his robotic tone, I left work early and rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, Karen was already there, but she ignored me and kept talking to William. It seemed neither of them planned to be present for the birth, so I decided to wait in front of the delivery room. I was too worried about the baby being born safely to be bothered by their behavior. And equally, I was looking forward to seeing what kind of child would be born. I wasn't sure how much time had passed. Suddenly, the sound of a baby's cry echoed from the room. I looked up to see a nurse peeking out from the door.
The baby is born safely. It's a girl.
I immediately entered the delivery room to see Sandra, sweating but with a relieved expression, holding the baby. I stared at the tiny grandchild in Sandra's arms. The baby, so small, hadn't even opened her eyes yet. The baby was quickly handed over to William.
Sandra, you did great. You were amazing.
Sandra, exhausted, only nodded without replying. Meanwhile, Karen and William were busy discussing what to name the baby. Even after handing the baby to me, they didn't offer any words of praise to Sandra. Instead, they ignored her and didn't even look her way. Watching the two of them, I became worried if Sandra would be all right continuing her married life like this. Fortunately, Sandra and the baby had no health issues, so they were discharged soon. I was eager to see my granddaughter Nancy's face, but I didn't feel like going to the in-laws' house. However, I couldn't tell Sandra to come to my place, so I continued my usual routine. A few weeks after Sandra's discharge, I was at home on my day off. Unfortunately, it was raining outside, so I stayed indoors. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, followed by loud banging on the front door. Startled, I headed to the door and heard shouting from the other side.
"Hey, I know you're in there. Open the door."
With trembling hands, I unlocked the door. As soon as I did, Karen shoved her way in, glaring at me with wide eyes.
"How dare you deceive William? Take responsibility,"
she yelled, her eyes bloodshot and spittle flying. Karen stood behind William, who had a robotic expression on his face.
"Wait a minute. What's going on?"
I tried to understand the situation, but Karen wouldn't listen.
"Do you think you can fool me just because you're rich? I'll make you pay in the divorce court."
She pointed her finger at my face and advanced, causing me to step back.
"What is this about? Please explain."
Karen's shrill yelling pierced my ears, giving me a headache.
"She cheated. Mom is angry. You need to take responsibility. Enough already."
If this one-sided yelling continued, I felt like I'd lose my mind from the stress. Upon hearing my shout, Karen stopped yelling and stared at me, eyes wide and mouth half open.
"I'm sorry. I have no idea what's going on. You need to explain, or I can't say anything."
But Karen and William remained silent. After a brief silence, Karen, with an unchanged expression, spoke.
"Fine. Then come to our house."
Following Karen's suggestion, I went to the in-laws' house for the first time. It wasn't far, so we walked. I already felt like I had used more than half of my energy. Reluctantly, I followed the two, carrying an umbrella, while our neighbors looked on worriedly. The in-laws' house was in an old residential area, and the interior was outdated. The color of the wood on the ceiling and walls was dull and dirty, and the floor was old. The lighting was still old fluorescent lights, making the already gloomy weather worse. The furniture and appliances were also old, as if time had stopped 30 years ago. In a corner of the room, Sandra sat with tears in her eyes, holding Nancy tightly.
"Sandra, what happened?"
Karen answered instead of Sandra.
"Look at the color of that child's eyes."
Following Karen's command, I looked into Nancy's eyes. I was shocked and let out a scream. Nancy's eyes were blue.
"Now do you understand what we mean? Sandra cheated. Those eyes are proof. Now take responsibility."
Sandra, with eyes full of tears, glared at Karen.
"You're wrong. I didn't cheat." "Shut up. How dare you betray my precious William?"
William joined in.
"It's not just me. You made Mom angry too. You'll pay for her retirement as well."
I listened in silence. It was true Sandra and William both had brown eyes. But I knew Sandra better than anyone. There was no hint of deceit in her expression. I believed Sandra.
"Wait. Let's calm down. There must be some explanation." "There is no explanation. Sandra cheated, and the color of the baby's eyes is proof."
Karen, with bloodshot eyes, pointed at Nancy. Nancy started to cry.
"Oh, I'm sorry. Don't cry, sweetheart."
Sandra desperately tried to soothe Nancy, but the two didn't care. I was worried that continuing the argument here would negatively affect Sandra and Nancy.
"Wait. Let's not fight in front of Nancy. Can we go to another room?"
The two nodded and led us to the next room. But it was more to escape the crying than for Nancy's sake. Sandra tried to follow, but I stopped her with my hand. "You stay here and take care of Nancy. Don't worry, I'll handle this." I didn't want my beloved Sandra to suffer anymore. Mom. However, the discussion didn't progress in the other room either. I desperately explained that Sandra didn't know anyone close with blue eyes.
That's not proof. People can have relationships through social media nowadays.
But they countered. It seems William is more concerned with how much alimony and settlement money he can claim from us in the divorce trial than with the fact that he's been cheated on. No matter what I say, the conversation always turns to money. But there was one unforgivable thing that made me so angry I could barely think about the money. It was Karen's words.
Sandra was supposed to take care of me, but now everything has gone to waste. She needs to take responsibility. Why is caregiving a given? That's just ridiculous.
Does she think Sandra is some sort of housekeeper who can provide care? Even if she's William's wife, there's no way I can allow that kind of treatment. But it seems Karen was seriously planning to use Sandra for her convenience until the very end. And William seemed to think that was completely normal. It was then that I realized just how abnormal this family was.
This isn't going to work. Take that kid and that useless Sandra and leave. I don't want to see them.
Karen spat out those words, and for once I agreed with her. I didn't want Sandra to stay in that place a second longer. I immediately took Sandra and left the house. Sandra cried the whole way home, but once we got back, she seemed a bit more at ease. Her expression softened, and she spoke kindly to Nancy. Sandra, I believe you. But I need to ask. You really didn't cheat, did you?
No, absolutely not.
Sandra looked me straight in the eye, not flinching. As I thought, there was no lie or evasion in her gaze. All right then. So why does Nancy have blue eyes? That's the real problem. I thought about it on the way home, but I had no idea. So I decided to contact David, who was overseas. But no matter how many times I called, I couldn't reach him. Even with the time difference, it shouldn't be that late over there. I decided to call his company directly. It took a bit of effort, but I finally got through to someone there and explained that I needed to talk to David. But it was no use. David was currently working in a remote mountain area, making it difficult to get in touch with him. I was worried about him working in such a place, but there was nothing I could do, so I left a message for him to call me when he returned. Dad seems to be having a tough time. Why did he have to go overseas? Sandra murmured as she looked out at the rain falling outside the window. Who knows, but he must have had his reasons. He doesn't talk much about himself. But I've been thinking, and I need you to hear me out. Sandra turned slowly towards me.
What is it?
To prove your words are true, we need to do a DNA test. I know you don't like it, but please cooperate. There was really nothing else we could do. No matter what we said, we were at a severe disadvantage trying to convince Karen and William. So we needed to use science to prove it. With that, even in court, we could help Sandra. Sandra's eyes lit up at the mention of a DNA test.
A DNA test, huh? That's a good idea. But will William agree to it?
Sandra's concern was soon proven right. On the next day off, I went to the in-laws' house to tell them about the DNA test. As before, the overcast sky made the in-laws' house look like a gloomy cave.
So, we'll get the alimony and settlement money in the divorce trial, right?
Karen was in a much better mood than before.
Yes, and I need to talk to you about that.
At that moment, William came in and made us coffee.
Thank you.
William, you're so good. Such a good boy. Karen said happily while patting William's head. He looked happy to be praised by Karen too.
You two get along well, don't you?
When I said that, Karen and William both looked at me with big smiles. Of course. Since my ex-husband left, William is the only family I have. I love him so much.
I love Mom too.
Karen and William seemed as close as lovers. Honestly, it's terrifying to bring up the DNA test at a time like this, but we can't move forward without it.
So, to clear things up, I think we should do a DNA test.
As soon as I said that, Karen and William froze. Then Karen's eyes widened again, and William looked like a robot.
A DNA test? Are you planning to hurt William?
It seems I've triggered a bad switch.
Your family is the worst. You don't trust us? You look down on us? You don't need a test to know about the affair.
Another attack, but this is the crucial moment.
With scientific evidence, we can both be convinced. We will cover the cost, of course. Science? Just because you're rich, you look down on us. You look down on poor people. I can't take it anymore. William, punish them.
At Karen's command, William stood up expressionlessly.
Please, it's a simple thing. Shut up. I'll post this on social media. William, get the kitchen knife.
Got it, Mom. William immediately headed to the kitchen. It's dangerous to stay here any longer. I took advantage of a moment's distraction, ran past Karen, and dashed to the front door. I grabbed my shoes and rushed out the door.
Wait! You won't get away with this. I'll make you pay.
Karen's screams echoed behind me as I desperately fled. After running a bit, I looked back and saw that Karen wasn't following, so I put on my shoes. The soles of my feet were blistered and painful, but my life was saved. I managed to get back home, but from that day, Karen's harassment began. She posted papers around the neighborhood saying Sandra had an affair, and sometimes she and William would walk around shouting it. I went to the police, but they wouldn't take it seriously because it wasn't a crime. I had to quit my part-time job and couldn't leave the house. This happened almost every day, but at least they didn't come on rainy days. I felt relieved as I watched the rain through the window, knowing Karen wouldn't come. Sandra looked a bit haggard from the stress, but she continued to take care of Nancy without complaint. When Nancy was born, everything was peaceful. I absent-mindedly recalled when Sandra was pregnant. William had forced his way into our home back then. If I had noticed how abnormal he and Karen were at that time, Sandra wouldn't have had to suffer. We had to buy daily necessities for him, but he never paid us back. It was just things like toothbrushes and underwear, not expensive enough to bother billing him for. There, I realized something. That's it. The toothbrush. I haven't thrown it away yet. I immediately went to the bathroom, opened the cabinet, and found William's toothbrush hidden in the corner. I carefully picked it up like a precious treasure and placed it in a plastic bag.
Sandra, I found the toothbrush William used. We can do a DNA test with this.
When I showed Sandra the toothbrush in the bag, her eyes lit up. Soon after, a DNA test was conducted to determine who Nancy's parents were. During that time, Karen's harassment continued, but we waited patiently. Unlike before, we now had hope with the DNA test. It had to be okay. Finally, the envelope with the results arrived, and we opened it together. The results clearly stated that Nancy was indeed Sandra and William's child. Sandra read it and then collapsed to the floor, crying loudly. Whether she was crying out of happiness or frustration, I couldn't tell. What was certain was that she hadn't cheated, and that was a relief. However, the mystery of Nancy's blue eyes was still unresolved. The answer came soon after from a call from David.
Sorry for the late response. What on earth happened?
I explained everything that had happened and finally asked if he knew why Nancy's eyes were blue. David didn't reply immediately but seemed to be thinking. After a while, he started to speak. I've never mentioned this before, but I have a mix of blood from various countries. The country I'm stationed in now is my grandma's homeland. I felt a connection and requested to be stationed here.
I didn't know you had such a reason.
Sorry about that. This is just my theory, but Grandma had blue eyes. If that gene persisted and showed up in Sandra's child, it would explain everything. With David's explanation, all the mysteries were solved, and Sandra and I hugged each other in joy. The next day was sunny, and soon Karen and William came to our house. Since I had the DNA test results as evidence, I invited them in. As soon as they entered the living room, they sat down and started demanding money.
We won't leave until you pay. We might as well live here from now on.
Saying that, they refused to budge. So, I showed them the DNA test documents. After reading them, they immediately started complaining again.
This is fake. You made this to deceive us. If that's the case, we can do another test. The toothbrush will be enough.
But if they were the type to back down easily, we wouldn't have had so much trouble. Instead of admitting their fault, Karen got angry and crumpled up the report, throwing it at me.
Don't get cocky. This fake document means nothing. Then explain why Nancy's eyes are blue.
I explained to Karen exactly what David had told me.
It's in the genes, so it's possible. If you're still unsatisfied, there's always genetic testing.
I made sure to maintain a firm and calm demeanor. The website advised that this was the best way to handle someone like Karen. As expected, Karen and William didn't push further. They seemed to be thinking of a better strategy but couldn't come up with anything. Acting as if nothing had happened, they stood up. Fine. We'll leave for today. Saying that, Karen and William headed to the door, and I followed them out.
Wait a moment. At least apologize to Sandra. You accused her so harshly.
But Karen wouldn't listen and even spat at me.
Shut up. What makes you think you've won? Now I'll post your misdeeds all over social media. Just you wait.
Mom, I'll help too.
I'll post embarrassing pictures of Sandra on social media.
With those words, the two left the house.
Stop right there.
I couldn't let Karen and William ruin Sandra's life any further. I quickly put on my sandals and rushed outside, only to be met with an unexpected scene. About 10 of our neighbors were surrounding Karen and William, glaring at them.
What do you think you're doing? This is none of your business.
Karen's voice trembled, clearly intimidated by the sheer number of people.
It is our business. You've caused Carol so much trouble. Did you think you could just leave without any consequences?
With those words from a neighbor, everyone started raising their voices. The neighbors surrounded Karen and William, demanding,
Apologize to Carol and Sandra right now.
They shouted in unison. Even the usually brazen Karen was unable to fight back against the crowd of people. Whenever she tried to escape, they quickly blocked her path. For a while, Karen and William stood there, frozen in place. Eventually, they gave in and agreed to apologize to me and Sandra.
We're very sorry. That's not enough. Promise that you'll stay away from us from now on. And delete those photos of Sandra, right here in front of everyone.
I demanded, my tone firm and resolute. But Karen remained silent, sweat beading on her forehead. She likely realized that without those photos, she would no longer have any leverage over us. It was only after the neighbors yelled at them that Karen and William finally accepted my demands. As soon as the apology was over, they scurried away like frightened mice. I was filled with gratitude for the help of my neighbors.
Everyone, I'm so sorry for causing you all this trouble.
But they all looked at me with kind, understanding eyes.
You have nothing to apologize for, dear. We all look out for each other in times of need. You're always there for us, Carol. And we all believed that you were doing the right thing.
At those words, I felt like everything I had been through was finally worth it, and tears began to flow freely down my cheeks. I turned to see Sandra holding Nancy close, crying tears of relief as well. From then on, our days were peaceful and uneventful. On sunny days, bright light streamed into our home, filling it with warmth. In that cozy glow, Nancy would energetically crawl around, playing with her toys. Sandra and I watched over her with adoring smiles.
I'm so glad everything worked out, even though it was really tough for a while there. Me too. But who would have thought Karen would end up getting exposed on social media like that? Well, she did bring a lot of attention to herself. And William got demoted and sent to some remote location, too.
I had heard about their fates from the neighbors. Apparently, Karen became so famous that people started vandalizing her house, and she couldn't even go outside anymore. It must be emotionally devastating for her, especially with her beloved William being so far away now. It can't be helped. We did what we could, I said, feeling a twinge of unease as I thought about Karen and William's situation.
Exactly. We went through so much. But I'm just so grateful that we have Nancy now.
Sandra gazed adoringly at Nancy as she spoke. Nancy's once pale blue eyes had darkened over time, turning a rich shade of brown. Without those eyes, Sandra's life would have taken a very different, darker path. Nancy truly saved us in more ways than one.
Well then, I'd better head out and do some shopping. I want to cook an extra special meal tonight,
I announced, standing up and slinging my shopping bag over my shoulder. His favorite dishes were all memorized, clear as day in my mind. It has been a while since Dad's been home, hasn't it?
Yep. That's why I've got to go all out.
I was excited to cook for David again after so long. He must be looking forward to seeing Nancy too. Our whole family would finally be together again. Feeling the joy of spending time with my loved ones, I headed out to the store.
Sally, you know what? If I can find evidence of how badly you've treated me, the law states that I could get an increased alimony in the divorce settlement.
Wow, you're such a terrible person. But considering our future life together, I guess that's the best way to go about it. I never imagined that behind my back, Tom was having these kinds of conversations with his mistress. He's completely ignoring his own infidelity while trying to frame me as the one at fault, just so he can get a bigger slice of the alimony pie. I feel pathetic for not seeing through his true colors sooner. But I can't afford to wallow in self-pity forever. I have someone precious I need to protect. No matter what, I have to safeguard my life with Henry, and I won't rest until I make that man pay for what he's done. That cheating bastard who's been having the time of his life, and that homewrecker who shattered my family while I was struggling with infertility treatments. I'll never forgive them. I'm Maria. I'm a working mom and I will be turning 37 this year. Living with my husband Tom, who's 6 years older, and our only son Henry. It's been 15 years since I graduated college and started working full-time at a welfare organization. Every day is a whirlwind of work and mommy duties. The welfare group I work for exclusively uses office supplies from the manufacturer Tom works at. So Tom and I go way back. Tom is a salesman at a major stationery company, and he's got a real way with words. When I was a newbie, I was at the very bottom of the totem pole. Ordering supplies, dealing with manufacturers, all the grunt work fell on my shoulders. That's when I met Tom.
Thanks for everything, as always. You know, Maria, I've always thought you have a beautiful smile.
Flattery will get you nowhere, mister. What's with the sudden compliment?
I'm just the type who blurts out whatever that's on my mind. I bet if I had a meal with you, it would taste dozens of times better than usual.
Back then, Tom was popular with the other female employees and super handsome, so I certainly didn't mind being complimented like that. Smooth talker, huh? Well then, how about we grab a bite sometime? You like your booze, don't you, Tom?
How'd you know that?
That sticker on your phone, it's from that wine event, right? I went to that too. We really hit it off chatting about the wine event and started going out for drinks after that. The more dates we went on, the more naturally the topic of marriage came up. I was 25 and Tom was 31 when we tied the knot. The timing felt just right, and as someone who loves good food, I felt lucky to be marrying a guy I could geek out about the same interests with. Married life was going smoothly, but every now and then Tom would catch me off guard with some out-of-the-blue comments. One time, Tom suddenly said he wanted to buy a house. We hadn't been married long and didn't have any kids yet. It completely threw me for a loop.
Wait, you want to buy a house now of all times? Yes, now. Just hear me out.
This was right around the time I turned 31. And was in the thick of fertility treatments. Each day felt like being stuck in a tunnel with no end in sight. The ever-increasing expenses and stress were suffocating me.
But you never even mentioned wanting our own place before. Isn't this too sudden?
There were plenty of times I couldn't figure out what Tom was thinking, but this was the first time he'd ever sprung something so unexpected on me.
We don't know what the future holds. There could be job transfers and whatnot.
Tom works for a big stationery company, and talks of relocating for work come up every few years. When you're married and thinking about having kids, you can't help being sensitive to that stuff. Tom seemed to have been thinking about it too.
I want us to build our future right here. What do you think, Maria?
I know what you mean. My family's close by too, and I don't want to leave this place.
I had a feeling you'd feel the same way.
For all we knew, we could have a baby any day. I didn't want any big changes to our current situation. I agreed to Tom's suggestion and we started making preparations to get our own house.
Thank you for understanding. It means a lot.
Just then, I remembered something my father had said. It just so happens that my dad has some land he's planning to repurpose from rice fields. He's looking to sell it now, so I'll ask if he'd be willing to give it to us instead.
What a stroke of luck!
If that works out, it would be such a blessing. When I consulted my father about the land and building our own home, he gladly agreed to hand it over to us. We decided to accept the plot from my parents and build our dream house there. The only issue was whose name to put on the deed. Due to his student loans and other debts, Tom didn't pass the screening for a mortgage. It was an unexpected hurdle, but we were both determined to build our home no matter what.
The thing is, I've got some money I've borrowed, so I can't qualify for a mortgage. Would it be okay to put it in your name, Maria?
I'm working too, so I think it'll be fine. I'll apply under my name then. In the end, the mortgage went through under my name and we were able to build our house without problems. 2 years after moving into our new home, we welcomed our long-awaited baby boy. I was increasingly grateful we had our own place. But there was one thing that nagged at me. During my fertility treatments, there were times around my pregnancy and delivery when I couldn't get in touch with Tom. It wasn't uncommon for my messages to go unread for days. Is it really possible for a regular office worker like Tom to be unreachable for days at a time? But I figured there was no use in dwelling on it. With our new house to pay for, I continued working while raising Henry. Juggling a full-time job with dropping Henry off at daycare could be tough at times, but thinking of Tom and Henry gave me the strength to push through. Today is another day to pick up Henry from the daycare center. Tom always seems to be swamped with work, so the daycare drop-offs and pickups have pretty much become 100% my responsibility.
Mommy, you're here!
Henry, I missed you so much. The moment I pick him up is pure happiness. Sometime after Henry had gotten used to going to daycare, Tom suddenly brought up the idea of extracurricular lessons for him.
Hey, what do you think about signing Henry up for gymnastics classes or something?
Huh? Gymnastics? Why all of a sudden? I asked as Tom scratched his head.
I mean, it's good for boys to be physically coordinated, right? It'd be sad if he got called slow or clumsy because he's not athletic.
I'm not particularly athletic myself, so the thought of sending him to gymnastics never crossed my mind. But Tom had a point, being physically capable certainly can't hurt. It's important to make sure kids don't develop an aversion to sports while they're young.
This gymnastics school seems to have a good reputation,
Tom said as he showed me a social media video. It featured a teacher dressed like an idol, smiling and dancing as she introduced the facilities.
The monthly fee is affordable and they offer sign-up gifts, so I think it's a good choice.
Wow, I didn't know places like this existed these days. All right then. Henry mentioned wanting to try lessons before, so I'll take him to observe a class. Seeing other kids his age having fun probably made Henry want to join too. Since Henry was asking for it, we decided to enroll him in the gymnastics school. By the way, this gymnastics place is a bit far from home. What about transportation?
Oh, I'll handle the drop-offs and pickups, don't worry. I'm the one who suggested it, after all. Really? But aren't you busy with work? It's fine, I'm telling you. It's my only chance to really talk with Henry.
Tom is a workaholic and barely gets any days off. Coming home on the last train every night is the norm for him. So for him to volunteer for this was enough to make me wonder what brought about the change.
Things have settled down at work lately with some departmental shuffles and restructuring. My new boss is more understanding if I explain the situation.
I see. So it's okay to leave the transportation to you?
Of course. Leave it to me.
True to his word, on days when Henry had gymnastics, Tom would without fail come home on time. I thought maybe this was an important bonding time for both Tom and Henry. So I decided not to interfere and just watch over them. Little did I know that decision would turn out to be a mistake, but that realization would come a bit later. Several months had passed since Henry started his gymnastics lessons. At first, he had trouble fitting in due to his shy personality, but now he had made close friends and seemed to be enjoying his classes. Usually, Tom would handle Henry's drop-offs and pickups, but he said he absolutely couldn't get off work this time, so I had to go instead. The destination was saved in the car's GPS, so I wouldn't get lost, but since it was my first time going, I felt a little nervous. When I arrived at the gym, Henry was so engrossed in practicing his cartwheels that he didn't even notice me. He would almost nail it, but then tumble over. As I stood there transfixed by his repeated attempts, I sensed someone approaching me.
Hello there.
Thank you for always taking care of my son. It was the woman dressed like an idol who I had seen in the facility introduction video Tom showed me before. I hadn't met her during Henry's enrollment process, so today was our first encounter.
Dad's not here today, huh? Is this your first time, Mom? I'm Sally.
she said, all while intently looking me up and down. I'm not used to being stared at so intensely, so it made me oddly nervous. Unable to bear her appraising gaze, as if she were sizing me up, I decided to strike up a conversation. My husband usually handles the transportation, but he said work would run late today, so I'm filling in. We really appreciate you looking after Henry.
Is that so? But is he really at work today?
Sally's eyes were sharp as she looked at me. Huh? He definitely said it was for work. He always comes home on time every Tuesday for this gymnastics class, but I guess today just didn't work out. At that, Sally broke into a smile and clapped her hands.
I see. He really is a great dad, isn't he?
Something about the way Sally said that with a nasty grin rubbed me the wrong way. But I had no reason to be on this gymnastics teacher's bad side when we just met, so I brushed it off as my imagination. That's just how dads should be, right? Sally's words and actions raised some red flags, but I let it slide and decided to head home. But looking back, I wish I had tried to glean more clues from Sally that time. Of course, I had no inkling of the regrets to come. In the end, Tom didn't get home until around 10 p.m.
How was Henry's gymnastics today?
I went, and I don't think there were any issues.
You didn't say anything unnecessary, did you?
He could at least express some gratitude, but instead he takes that tone with me? Ignoring my displeasure, Tom abruptly changed the subject.
Unnecessary things? Never mind. Oh, by the way, I'll be away on a business trip starting tomorrow, so, yeah. A sudden business trip, huh? Until when?
With that, Tom started walking toward the bedroom, irritably loosening his tie.
Until when? That depends on how work goes. How would I know?
Oh, I see. Tom's made no effort to hide his foul mood lately. Better not to pry, I guess. The first weekend rolled around after Tom left for his business trip. I decided to clean Tom's study. Knowing him, I bet he never cleans it himself and it's a total mess in there. I brought in a vacuum cleaner, a rag, and a disinfectant spray with the intention of doing some serious cleaning. Bracing myself, I opened the door to the study, and in that instant, I remember feeling that something was off. Tom's study was oddly spotless. The papers were neatly stacked on the right side, the files organized by height, and the cords tidily bundled. Every single thing was clean to a degree I never would have imagined from the Tom I knew. The desk, without a speck of dust, looked like something out of a model room. Honestly, with everything this spotless, there was nothing left for me to do. With that thought, I grabbed my cleaning supplies and was about to leave the room when it suddenly hit me. Had Tom ever kept his study this clean before? He was the type who couldn't care less how messy his space got, utterly indifferent to it all. Henry, on the other hand, had a weak constitution since he was little, and house dust was his worst enemy. Tom never cleaned his study, so whenever he came out of there, it often triggered coughing fits for Henry that wouldn't stop. No matter how many times I warned him or pleaded with him for Henry's sake, Tom never lifted a finger to clean, not even once. Why the hell should I have to clean? If it bugs you that much, you do it, Maria.
You've got work documents and stuff in there, right? If I go messing with things and you can't find them later, that's on you. Besides, I want you to clean what you can because the house dust makes Henry's cough nonstop.
I'll never forget how irritated Tom sounded when he retorted.
What's wrong with him is that he's coughing pathetically even though he's a boy.
Must have inherited your weak constitution, Maria. Tom, who had no qualms saying hurtful things just to get out of cleaning. There's no way that same Tom would clean this much without a reason. For him to tidy up to this extent, there had to be some motive behind it. First, I checked his desk and noticed papers sticking out in an odd way. Pulling them out, I found divorce papers, all filled out. Every section that required Tom's input was completed. Had I done something to make him bring up divorce? As I searched for any other potential clues, I spotted something glinting in the crack of his closet. Trepidatiously, I took a look and found an unfamiliar dolphin charm.
Huh? What's this charm? There's even half a heart on it. What's the matter?
It's nothing. The charm with a glittering blue dolphin and half a heart was attached to a smartphone I'd never seen before. His work phone. But didn't Tom say he was going on a business trip? Would he really forget to bring his work phone on a business trip? My curiosity piqued. I opened the folio-style smartphone case. It looked like a normal case, but the card slot seemed oddly bulky. When I felt it, there was a single photo inside. The photo, seemingly taken at an aquarium, showed Tom and Sally together. In the corner, a child could also be seen. I had a bad feeling about this. As much as I wanted it to be a lie, I couldn't stop wondering what was on that smartphone. Given that he had a photo with Sally, it definitely wasn't his work phone. It wasn't the one he used in front of me either, so then, could it be a phone he got solely to contact his affair partner? Probably never imagining anyone else would see it, the smartphone didn't have a lock on it. Considering myself lucky, I opened up the phone. Nervously checking his messages, I found a mountain of evidence of his cheating. It seemed he met Sally, the gymnastics teacher, through a dating app and was using this smartphone to communicate with her. When I opened the messaging app, there was a speech bubble next to Sally's name.
Let's hurry up and get divorced so we can be together.
And selfie icon that read. As I scrolled, I spotted a message from Tom to Sally.
Just wait a bit. If I can get proof that Maria treated me horribly, I should be able to get more alimony in the divorce.
Well, aren't you awful? But I suppose that's for the best, considering our life together from here on.
I want to hurry up and live together with the child I had with you, Sally.
That's the kind of exchange that was left behind. His child? Wondering what on earth this meant, I read a bit further into the messages and discovered that apparently, he had a child with Sally. And at this very moment, it came to light that he was on an adultery trip with Sally, using his paid time off. The travel plans they were discussing were for that very day. Reading it made me feel sick to my stomach, but I couldn't afford to throw up here. Continuing to read, new facts emerged. Tom and Sally had a 6-year-old daughter together. They were planning a party for when they officially registered their marriage, and after divorcing me, he intended to move Sally and their child into this house to live together. From what I could gather in the messages, it seemed he had cheated on me with someone he met through a dating app while I was struggling with fertility treatments. Unforgivable. Along with my disillusionment with Tom, I could see what I needed to do. I had to protect my life with Henry. Without delay, I launched my counterattack. I thought the secret affair phone and divorce papers alone might not be strong enough as evidence. If I wasn't careful, he might find a way to weasel out of it. To further solidify my proof, I searched through drawers and closets. That's when I found a marriage registration form and a pair of rings engraved with Sally's name. I added my own name and necessary information to the completed divorce papers I found in the room and went to submit them. Without his knowledge, of course. For him to have everything prepared that meticulously, it could only mean one thing. More than anything, I couldn't bear the thought of living under the same roof as someone capable of infidelity. The fact that he had the divorce papers ready to that extent, with all his sections filled out, meant he was fully intent on divorcing from the start. Considering he even had a marriage form with Sally and their rings neatly tucked away in a drawer, I certainly wasn't going to end my revenge with just submitting the divorce papers. I wouldn't be satisfied unless I went all the way. I proceeded with the steps to sell the house. The land and house were both in my name, so there were no particular issues and I could handle the process based on my judgment alone. Shops and bus stops had popped up around our home, increasing its value, so it was an unexpected stroke of luck that I was able to sell it at a profit even after factoring in the mortgage. While Tom was away from home for work, I was able to steadily move forward with the sale talks. It took a few months, but in the end, I sold the house that was under my name. I had already explained the situation to my parents, so there was no problem with where to live after the sale. If anything, I was grateful for all the ways they helped with my and Henry's living situation. I had the cooperation of my childhood friend who worked as a real estate agent and taught me how to sell the house in secret, so the sale was done on the down low and Tom had no idea the house had been sold. As soon as I got the call from my childhood friend, I packed up my things and left the house together with Henry. Lately, even when Tom did come home, he would avoid me by returning late at night and leaving early in the morning, so he never saw me or Henry at all. Tom was still frequently away from home for business trips and work as usual, so he seemed completely oblivious to the fact that Henry and I were preparing to leave. Tom reached out to me while Henry and I were temporarily staying with my parents after leaving the house. "Where are you?" I could hear the irritation in Tom's voice over the phone, but it was just as I expected. "What does it matter where I am? Why are you suddenly calling me, Tom?" "I got off work early today, and when I got home, some stranger was there. They abruptly asked me when I could move out, which made no damn sense. Did anything happen while you were at the house, Maria?" I figured this was the right timing, so I decided to tell Tom. "I put the house up for sale while you were gone. I thought it would take longer, but I guess I got lucky." "What? What the hell are you saying? You sold my house without my permission." I was appalled by Tom's words. He seemed to be under the impression that it was his house and couldn't contain his anger. "You think you can get away with doing whatever you want without asking the man of the house?" "Man of the house? Who?" I couldn't help but retort. "Your house. What are you talking about?" "It's my house. I already know you've been hanging out at your mistress's place every day, Tom. What's that supposed to mean? It's creepy how you've been sneaking around." I could hear him click his tongue on the other end of the line. "What proof do you have that I'm cheating? And with no house, where the hell do you expect me to live?" "I don't need to spell it out for you here. Just don't forget that the land and house were in my name, got it? I don't care where you live, Tom, but hand it over pronto." "What the hell do you take me for, Maria?" "A complete stranger." I submitted the divorce papers, by the way. "Go shack up with your mistress and that should solve everything, right? The one you were fooling around with while I was suffering through treatments. I won't even ask for alimony, so count yourself lucky." Then, unable to contain his glee, Tom started talking over the phone. "I couldn't care less about you, Maria. Do whatever you want. I never planned on paying alimony anyway." After hearing Tom's words, I hung up the phone. Not once did he bring up Henry or show even a shred of concern for him. I couldn't forgive Tom for that. Honestly, I had even thought that as long as I could quickly leave Tom behind, driven solely by my own pain, that would be enough. But I realized that was the wrong approach. I had to find a way to hurt Tom, who didn't spare a single thought for Henry and acted like he didn't even exist. Somehow, I wanted to make Tom pay. That's when I got some good news from an acquaintance at the gymnastics school. Apparently, Sally was planning a wedding party and inviting her close friends. It seemed Sally was connected with some of the gymnastics school moms on social media. She had supposedly made posts on there hinting at a party she was planning at a rented-out wedding venue. An acquaintance gave me her account info, so I checked it out right away and saw Sally's posts gushing with happiness.
The joy of marrying someone you truly love.
From the way she was posting, you could tell her head was filled with bliss. Following her social media posts, I was able to find out the wedding party's location and date, so I decided to crash it that day. On the day of the wedding party, I was at the wedding hall in the neighboring town. Henry and I had been eagerly awaiting this day. I couldn't believe he cheated on me without any regard for our family, and his mistress had to be our son's gymnastics teacher of all people.
Let's go.
Yeah. Mom, can you tell him directly?
Yep. And Henry, you don't need to push yourself, okay?
Henry looked at me and smiled.
Mom, I thought something might be up since you always seemed down when Dad was around, but don't overdo it yourself, okay?
The wedding hall had an open setup, so it had a welcoming vibe like anyone could come in. When I dropped Tom's name, I was immediately led into the venue where they were introducing the bride and groom's profiles. They spun the story of how Sally met Tom while working as a gymnastics instructor in an unfamiliar place as a single mother, finally reaching the goal of marriage. Watching the meticulously crafted profile video made me want to hurl, but I couldn't afford to lose it here. I made my way through the crowd and reached where Sally was. Sally had just finished talking with a friend and was standing alone, so I thought the timing was perfect. I approached from behind and tapped her on the shoulder. The way Sally's face stiffened when she turned around still makes me laugh to this day.
Long time no see, Teach. How've you been?
I'll never forget the shocked look on Sally's face when she saw me.
What? No way. Henry's mom? Why are you here? I should be asking you that. Throwing a wedding party like this. So you're the one Tom's remarrying, huh?
For a moment she looked uncomfortable, but quickly replied.
We just had a fateful encounter while I was working at the gymnastics school. The only difference is timing, but I was his destined partner, you see. I hear you have a child, Sally. So you and Tom are getting married with kids in tow?
It's just like we showed in the profile video.
He loves me, child and all, so I decided to marry him.
The child was the one I saw in the corner of the photo tucked in that smartphone case. Watching the kid next to Sally boredly playing games on a phone, it was easy to imagine they hadn't been raising the child properly. I borrowed the mic from the MC and shouted out right then and there.
Everyone, I'm Tom's ex-wife who he just recently divorced. Sally says she's remarrying and bringing a child from her previous husband, but take a look at this.
I held up a single sheet of paper.
I have the results of a DNA test right here. We had it done, and well, what do you know? The connection was proven.
The wedding guests started making a commotion. The group that had been boredly drinking until now and the women who were fixing their hair all turned to look at me.
Which means your child is not a stepchild to my ex-husband. They were actually parent and child from the start. How does it feel to have introduced the child born from an affair to the real father? What? Why would you say something like that?
The human gaze is hard to deceive, and the murmuring only grew louder and louder. I couldn't wrap my head around the nerve of showing up as the father to a child born from cheating. Just moments ago, they were brazenly spinning the tale of a fated marriage in their backstory and profiles, so it was no wonder the guests were watching with shock and curiosity.
I'm amazed you were this close. To think you had more than a teacher-student's parent relationship. But I wonder what people at your work will say when they find out the truth behind this marriage. We just matched on an app, okay? Leave it alone.
Beside me, Henry was recording the wedding on his phone. I took the phone from Henry and told Sally and Tom.
I wonder what would happen if I sent this video to your coworkers. From the looks of it, I bet they have no idea you've been having an affair for years.
I showed them the customer inquiry pages on both their company's websites. Then I operated the phone and attached the video I just recorded.
If you thought you could cheat and start a new life scot-free, you're dead wrong, Sally and Tom. You're sending this to our workplaces? What good would that do? Exactly. They'll just think it's some prank video or something. No one can tear apart our destined bond.
Undaunted by their words, I continued.
You see, I sent this directly to your bosses at work, no, to people even higher up than that. What? What do you mean? I sent an inquiry a little while back and was told they wanted to be contacted directly. We agreed that I would send it like this. Why the hell would you do that on your own? What are we supposed to do now? My promotion was riding on this.
Tom clutched his head in frustration, but that's none of my concern.
I don't know what you reported to them, but I can't imagine your companies would tolerate infidelity. You better be prepared for the fallout.
As I spoke, Tom and Sally glared at me in vexation, but the story doesn't end there. Right after the wedding, the two of them were apparently called in by their respective workplaces. Not only was Tom's path to promotion blocked, I heard he got transferred to a regional branch. Even if he wanted to quit, he has no special skills to speak of, and they saw right through the fact that he couldn't realistically change jobs at his age. As for Sally, she was fired and now has to live on Tom's income alone. Even with a child, he got demoted and his meager salary will make it tough to get by. Sally's social media, which used to be filled with glamorous posts, gradually became overrun with complaints. Posts that clearly showed she was mentally unwell or desperately seeking attention started to stand out, and her follower count visibly dwindled. Occasionally, there are blatant posts bad-mouthing me. I bet she hasn't doubted for a second that what she did was wrong. In a way, I'm almost envious she can live her life with such a lack of self-awareness. Now, I used the money from selling the house to buy an apartment where I'm living with Henry. Henry is about to reach the age to graduate elementary school. Our new life keeps me busy with all sorts of things, but I feel like I can overcome it all as long as I'm with Henry.
Mom, where should I put this box?
Oh, that one goes in the next room.
Okay. What should I do with this?
Henry showed me a cardboard box filled with Tom's belongings. I was considering throwing it out, but then thought it wasn't right to toss it without permission, so I was stumped about how to dispose of it. As we were sorting through our things, noon rolled around.
It's already this late.
I'm gonna pop over to the nearby convenience store. What do you want for lunch? I'll pick something up.
The new pasta they just released. I've been wanting to try it ever since I saw the commercial.
Got it. Actually, let's both take a break and go shopping together. When we walked out to the apartment entrance, I laid eyes on someone I couldn't believe. It was Tom. I had only told a select few people the address of our new apartment, but somehow Tom found out and was standing in front of the building. I nearly screamed when I saw him.
Long time no see.
I guess he can't shake the habit of trying to act cool. When he saw me and Henry, he raised the corner of his mouth and lifted his hand. That gesture that seemed so suave when we were dating now just looks pathetic.
Huh? What are you doing here? Wow, you sound so harsh. Is it so wrong to want to see you once in a while? Once in a while? Henry, and I don't want to see your face at all.
He glared at me and then immediately turned to face Henry.
About time you started wanting to see your old man again, huh? I know, let's hit up a family restaurant. Order whatever you want, it's on me.
Henry brushed off his hand and looked at Tom with an expression like he was staring at something filthy.
Don't joke around. Why the hell would I go to a restaurant with you? You? What's with that attitude? You go and cheat without a care, wreck our lives, and now it's all I'm so happy these days. Maybe I should grace my kid with my presence once in a while.
Spare us the bad comedy routine. Tom tried to grab us in a fit of anger, but Henry dodged him. In the blink of an eye, Henry had Tom locked in a grapple.
What? What's going on?
Henry has been practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since he started elementary school. He's now one of the top-ranked practitioners in the States, so his skills are the real deal. Tom, caught in Henry's self-defense technique, has a look on his face like he can't comprehend what's happening. The way he effortlessly applies the hold with such fluid movements is enough to make even me, his mother, stare in awe.
I'm glad I kept up my training all this time, thinking I'd protect Mom from getting hurt. Let go of me! You think it's okay to use violence against your father? I don't think of you as a father. Going there with you will ruin the restaurant. Still not getting it?
I guess being told off like that by his own son was a real shock, because he turned and left. I was surprised to see how strong Henry had become, and it filled me with joy. After that, Tom stopped showing his face around us. Honestly, I didn't want to see him anyway, so good riddance. Despite everything that happened, I think Henry grew up to be a strong yet kind young man. As a parent, I couldn't be happier. Maybe it got through to him that I never wanted him to take after Tom, his father, but Henry really is a sweetheart. It makes me shudder to think what would have happened if I had ignored that divorce filing and kept living as I was. I'm still working at the same job as before, but I feel like this was the right choice. Now, I've renewed my resolve to live for my own and Henry's happiness. Hey, Abigail. Are you really okay? On the morning of the field trip, I asked my granddaughter Abigail. But Abigail replied,
I'm fine. Plus, I'm looking forward to Grandma's delicious sandwiches, so I'm going.
And left the house earlier than usual. I watched Abigail head to school with a prayerful heart. I hope it ends up being a fun day. I couldn't help but wish. But my wish didn't come true. Just 30 minutes later, the worst happened.
Abigail! What happened?
When I opened the door, there stood my granddaughter, who had supposedly left for the field trip earlier, crying with her backpack covered in mud. Then,
look inside,
she said, offering the backpack filled with a ton of trash. I felt a surge of rage at the tragic sight.
What is this?
As I trembled with anger trying to remove the trash from the backpack.
Is something wrong?
My son Richard, who was working remotely, appeared behind me.
Richard, this,
I said, trying to suppress my anger and disappointment, presenting Abigail's backpack to him. Richard then picked up the trash from the backpack and, "Is this?" murmured with a smile towards Abigail. The next moment,
"That's great,"
he said.
"Yeah, everyone put it in." I was so happy I cried. Now, I'll be late for the field trip if I don't go,
Abigail said laughing and went back to school. Left out of the loop, I stood dumbfounded watching Abigail energetically run off. My name is Isabella, a 55-year-old housewife. My husband Kevin and I have been living with our son Richard and granddaughter Abigail for the past 5 months. The reason for our living together was that Richard's wife, Madison, passed away due to illness. Madison had terminal cervical cancer. She always had severe menstrual pains and would often rely on over-the-counter painkillers when feeling unwell. Additionally, she had irregular periods and occasional abnormal bleeding from a young age, which made her insensitive to bodily changes. As a result, by the time she realized something was wrong, it was already too late.
When the hospital called to say she needed to be admitted for treatment immediately, I was in shock.
Richard told me over the phone that Madison had cervical cancer, his voice filled with despair and powerlessness. The shock of the cancer diagnosis was one thing, but in Madison's case, the cancer had already begun to spread to other areas, making surgery impossible. Therefore, they had to try chemotherapy and radiation therapy. However, the treatments did not have the hoped-for effects. Richard's voice became increasingly dark and weak with each phone call. All I could do was listen to my son's stories. And respond. Then, a year ago, Madison quietly passed away in her hospital bed. It happened just 8 months after the cancer was discovered.
If only I had pushed harder for her to go to the gynecologist.
After Madison's death, Richard blamed himself for his indifference to her health and fell into a deep depression. In addition to caring for Abigail, who was in the 1st grade, and managing unfamiliar household tasks, he was overwhelmed both physically and emotionally. Abigail, too, seemed confused by the sudden loss of her mom, occasionally crying at night and refusing to go to school. My husband and I wanted to encourage and support them, so we suggested living together. Initially, Richard was hesitant, but he said,
"Having someone always at home might make Abigail feel safer,"
becoming more open to the idea. However, Richard had one major concern about living together. It was that Abigail would have to transfer schools as we moved in together. Richard worried that transferring schools, especially while grieving Madison's death, would be too much of a psychological burden for Abigail. But facing the reality of juggling work, household duties, and childcare, he felt he was reaching his limit. After much deliberation, Richard couldn't come to a decision. So, he decided to ask Abigail herself how she felt about it. "Hey, Abigail. Grandma and Grandpa said they'd like us to live with them at their house. What do you think?"
Live at Grandma and Grandpa's house? I want to go.
Is that so? It means you'll have to change schools. Is that okay?
What does change schools mean?
It means just like moving houses, you'll move to a new school. So, you won't see your current school friends anymore. Is that okay?
I see. Does Dad want to move?
Dad is fine with whatever. What you want is most important.
Then I want to move. That means Grandma will always be with me, right?
Yes, both Grandma and Grandpa will be with you always. So, let's start preparing for the move, okay? Abigail nodded strongly in agreement to Richard's final confirmation. Thus, my son's family came to live with us. Later on, I learned that Abigail decided to move for Richard's sake. Dad looks so busy with work every day, and he seems really busy with things like my homework and meals. So, I thought it would be easier for Dad if Grandma and Grandpa were with us. When Madison was in critical condition, I had stayed at Richard's house and took over all the household duties. It seems Abigail thought that living with us would reduce Richard's burden based on that experience. Both my husband and I were deeply touched by Abigail's kindness. And so, in place of busy Richard, we gave all our love and time to Abigail. Perhaps because of our efforts, Abigail, who was initially quiet and reserved after moving, gradually began to regain her former brightness. Still, sometimes she would look sadly at classmates chatting happily with their moms during shopping trips or school events. Even if she's putting on a brave face, it must still be hard for her. At that moment, I resolved to do anything I could for Abigail's smile. One day, while shopping at a nearby supermarket, a woman around Richard's age approached me.
"Hello. You're Abigail's grandmother, right?" I'm the mom of Scarlett, who's in the same class. My daughter always talks about how kind you are.
This woman, who introduced herself as Elizabeth, approached me with a strong perfume scent and a forced smile. I recognized her face, so I knew immediately she was a parent from the same class. However, I didn't have a very good impression of Elizabeth. The reason is, when I attended a school event in place of Richard, Elizabeth and other moms would look at me and Abigail and laugh, sharing rumors. I thought it might be a misunderstanding at first, but the same happened even when Richard attended. I thought she was quite rude. But since we were just classmates' parents and didn't interact much, I decided not to worry about it. Being unexpectedly approached by someone I was not comfortable with.
What should I do? I'm not very fond of this person,
I thought to myself. But thinking of her as my granddaughter's mom, I decided to continue the conversation for a while. Elizabeth then stood in the middle of the supermarket aisle and suddenly started bragging about her family. I can't give you details because it's personal, but my husband is a rising star in a big corporation. So, he earns more than most people. And he's trusted so much by his boss that he's about to get promoted. Is that so? Congratulations.
Plus, my daughter is academically excellent and popular in her class. She was even scouted to be a kids model.
That's impressive. I should be going soon. Thinking it wasn't a conversation worth blocking the supermarket aisle for, I attempted to leave. Then Elizabeth,
just listen till the end, I'm not finished,
raised her voice suddenly. Taken aback by her abrupt change, I involuntarily stopped.
This is why I hate dealing with old people. Anyway, what I'm saying is, your granddaughter is a bad influence, so I'd appreciate it if she didn't associate with my daughter anymore.
Eh? What do you mean?
Abigail's mom died from an illness, right? It's really sad for Abigail, left behind. She still looks sad sometimes. It's like she's spreading unhappiness? Like a walking misfortune?
What are you trying to say?
Basically, Abigail's presence is bothersome.
What are you talking about?
It's a critical time for us. My husband is up for a promotion. So, I've told my daughter not to hang out with Abigail, to avoid catching her bad luck. But Abigail keeps following her around, and it's causing us trouble. Please tell her off firmly.
Elizabeth said that and disappeared into the crowd at the supermarket with a snide smile. I was left standing there, stunned by the cruel content of the conversation and the unexpected event, unable to retort. That evening, when my husband Kevin came home, I told him about what happened at the supermarket.
So, that happened. Maybe Abigail is having a hard time at school? What should we do? Call the teacher? Oh, should we consult with Richard first?
Isabella, calm down. Did any other parents say something like this?
Eh?
No, this was the first time. Then let's just talk to Richard and observe a bit more. We don't want to make a fuss and make Abigail feel worse, right?
But to be told such things? She must be suffering at school. At least, let's ask about how things are at school. Okay?
All right, calm down. I'll bring it up during dinner tonight and see how things go from there. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
My husband reluctantly agreed, understanding my feelings. I really wanted to ask Abigail directly. But upon reflection, I might press her too much out of concern if I were to ask. Thinking this, my husband seemed more suited to calmly handle the conversation this time. That night, dinner was just the three of us, as Richard came home late from work. Abigail helped with dinner as usual and enjoyed my cooking, saying it was delicious. From her behavior, It was hard to believe she was having a hard time at school.
Maybe she's hiding it so we won't notice.
For the first time today, I doubted Abigail's actions. And as the meal was coming to an end, I signaled my husband. He cleared his throat and casually asked Abigail,
"How's the new school? Are you having fun?"
Abigail stopped eating and was silent for a while at the sudden question. Then, in a small voice, "It was fun before, but not so much now," she answered. I thought to myself, I knew it. Then, "What's not fun?" I asked Abigail. Abigail hesitantly began to talk about what was happening at school. Scarlett suddenly said she didn't want to play anymore. She said we couldn't be together during break or when going home from school. According to Abigail, Scarlett had suddenly started ignoring and avoiding her about a month ago. And because of that, other classmates also began to act distant towards Abigail. "Why doesn't Scarlett want to play with you anymore? Did you ask her why?" My husband also asked Abigail, sounding concerned. But it seems Abigail herself couldn't think of any reason. "Maybe everyone hates me now?" Abigail muttered, then cried with big tears rolling down her cheeks.
"I may have underestimated how serious the situation was."
I quietly stood up, hugged Abigail, and gently rubbed her back. Then, Richard came home. Surprised by the sight of Abigail crying, my husband explained the conversation during dinner. Richard, somehow very calm, knelt down to match Abigail's gaze and said,
"It's okay, Abigail. No matter what, the three of us will protect you."
He gently stroked Abigail's head. Then, standing up, he said, "Dad, can I talk to you for a sec?" And called my husband to another room to start a discussion. Probably about what to do next. Abigail, perhaps touched by Richard's words, began to cry loudly, releasing her pent-up feelings. I held her, letting her cry until she felt better, and strongly wished that these sad tears would only be for today. A few days later, Abigail brought home a letter about an upcoming field trip.
"The timing is terrible, knowing she's not getting along with her friends and now a field trip."
The moment I read the letter, I imagined Abigail being alone on the field trip, and remembered the big tears from a few days ago, feeling my heart was about to burst.
"Hey, Abigail. Just in case, if you don't want to go on the field trip, you don't have to force yourself."
I shared my thoughts with Abigail before consulting Richard or my husband. I knew it was important to discuss as a family, but I couldn't help worrying about Abigail. Then, after a moment of silence, Abigail said,
"I'm okay. I want to go on the field trip because I want to eat Grandma's sandwiches,"
and answered with her usual bright smile. That night, Abigail excitedly told her dad and my husband about the field trip. Both smiled and said,
"Sounds fun."
But I couldn't shake off my worries. So, on the morning of the day, "Hey, Abigail. Are you really okay?" I asked again. However, Abigail said,
"I'm okay. Plus, I'm looking forward to Grandma's delicious sandwiches, so I'm going,"
and left the house earlier than usual. I watched Abigail head to school with a prayerful heart.
Please, let it end as a fun day.
But my wish did not come true. Just 30 minutes later, the worst happened. The doorbell rang and I rushed to the front door in a panic.
"Abigail! What happened?"
There stood my granddaughter, who had supposedly left for the field trip earlier, crying with her backpack covered in mud. Then, "Look inside," she said, offering the backpack filled with a ton of trash. The leisure sheet we folded neatly together the night before, the field trip guidebook we colored cutely, and the sandwiches I made that morning were all buried under the trash and not visible. I felt a surge of intense anger at the tragic sight.
What is this?
As I trembled with anger trying to remove the trash from the backpack.
Is something wrong?
My son Richard, who was working remotely, appeared behind me. Despite everything, Richard was worried about Abigail too. Unusually for him, he had said, "I'll work remotely today," and stayed in the living room from the morning to keep an eye on Abigail. And after Abigail left, he seemed restless and couldn't concentrate on his work. Richard must have been hoping that Abigail would enjoy the field trip and return home happily. But instead, this happened.
Richard, this.
I said, trying to suppress my anger and despair while presenting Abigail's backpack to him. Then Richard picked up the trash from the backpack and, "Is this?" murmured with a smile towards Abigail. The next moment,
"That's great,"
he said. I was confused by Richard's incomprehensible behavior, almost raising my voice in confusion. However, Abigail, just like Richard, laughed and said,
"Yeah, everyone put it in." I was so happy I cried. "Now, I'll be late for the field trip if I don't go,"
and went back to school. Left out of the loop, I stood dumbfounded watching Abigail energetically run off. Richard then told me,
"We've taken care of it, it's going to be okay now,"
and smiled gently before going upstairs. My head was still full of unanswered questions. But I didn't want to disturb Richard while he was working, so I silently started to clean up the dishes in the living room. I don't really understand, but I'm just glad Abigail could smile. At that moment, I was happier to see Abigail's smile than to resolve my own questions. Since Richard said,
"It's going to be okay,"
I thought I could talk to him later at leisure. I felt a sense of relief for the first time in days and felt lighter. After finishing the chores, I unusually dozed off on the living room sofa. When I woke up, it was an hour before Abigail's return.
"Oh no! I slept so much. I have to do the laundry, prepare the bath, and make dinner."
I hurried to finish the chores and was preparing dinner when, as expected, Abigail returned home. As usual, the doorbell rang, and I responded with, "Coming." But the scene displayed on the screen made me tense up again. There was a man with a regretful face, a girl who looked like she might start crying any moment, and Elizabeth with a very unhappy face. In a panic, I called for Richard upstairs. Surprised but calm, Richard first opened the door and warmly welcomed Abigail.
"Welcome back."
With a smile. Abigail returned the smile just like in the morning. "I'm home," she answered and jumped into Richard's arms. Watching Richard and the others. "Nice to meet you, I'm Scarlett's dad."
May I have a moment of your time?"
The unfamiliar man spoke in a weak voice. Richard quietly responded, "Please, come in," and welcomed the three of them to the entrance. Indeed, this man was Scarlett's dad, and the girl was Abigail's classmate, Scarlett. Upon entering, Scarlett's dad immediately started to apologize deeply. "I'm truly sorry for my wife's disgraceful actions that deeply hurt your daughter." Next to him, "I'm sorry, Abigail." Scarlett also tearfully apologized. Scarlett's dad then continued to explain the situation. It turns out Scarlett was popular among her friends, and Elizabeth took pride in that. However, when Abigail transferred to the school, she quickly became the center of attention in the class. Scarlett didn't mind this and would often talk about Abigail to Elizabeth. Elizabeth then said,
"Just because she's a transfer student, she's getting too much attention. Using the fact that she doesn't have a mom to garner sympathy from everyone. What a mean girl. Scarlett is the star of the class. I'll make sure she realizes that."
And she told Scarlett,
"Listen, Scarlett. Abigail is actually a very mean girl. You shouldn't hang out with her. Make sure to tell this to your classmates too and suggest that everyone stops playing with Abigail. Got it? You can do it, right?
I really wanted to keep playing with Abigail. But if I broke the promise, Mom would punish me. Scarlett clung to her dad's arm and earnestly shared her feelings. It later turned out that the punishment Scarlett mentioned involved Elizabeth hitting her on the head, back, or buttocks. Scarlett was just scared of the punishment and had been following Elizabeth's orders. Elizabeth, who had been controlling Scarlett through violence, didn't expect what happened next. Not a single one of Scarlett's classmates accepted her suggestion. Instead, wanting to cheer up Abigail, who was mourning her mom, they secretly collected empty snack boxes with points for Abigail's favorite character merchandise. Unaware of this, Abigail had been concerned about her classmates whispering and hiding things from her. A few days ago during dinner, "Maybe everyone hates me." That's why she tearfully told us. But in reality, Abigail wasn't disliked by anyone. On the contrary, the kids had come up with the idea to surprise her with gifts on the field trip day. Abigail went to school earlier than usual that day because her classmates had called her out for the surprise. When she arrived in the classroom, her classmates filled her backpack with those empty boxes.
Wow, thank you, everyone. Oh, I need to tell Dad and Grandma about this. I'll be right back.
Abigail excitedly left the classroom, clutching her backpack. But she tripped and fell at the shoe lockers, getting her backpack covered in mud. That's when Scarlett happened to pass by. "Abigail, are you okay?"
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just going to go home for a bit.
A forgotten item?
No, look, isn't it amazing?
Scarlett remembered the classmates' surprise gift upon seeing inside Abigail's backpack.
I'm going to show it to Grandma and Dad.
Seeing Abigail's beaming smile, Scarlett wanted to do something for her too. So she said, "Oh, wait. You're hurt, so let me put this on you," and offered to put her cherished character Band-Aid on Abigail's knee.
Really? Isn't this your treasure?
It's okay. Because Abigail is an important friend.
Thank you. I'll rush over and show you, or else we'll be late for the field trip.
On her way home, Abigail seemed moved by everyone's kindness, tears overflowing. I saw Abigail, muddy backpack and all, crying, and thought she had a terrible time at school. But to think such a wonderful thing was happening. Both Richard and I were moved by this wonderful event and found ourselves in tears.
Scarlett really loves you. So, if you don't mind, please play with Scarlett again. We'd really appreciate it.
Scarlett's dad said this and then apologized deeply once more. Your feelings have come across clearly, so please, no need for apologies. Abigail, you can make up with Scarlett, right?
Yeah. Scarlett is an important friend.
Afterward, I'm so sorry, they said, apologizing repeatedly as the three of them went home. Throughout this conversation, Elizabeth didn't say a word. She glared at us the entire time with a look of dissatisfaction.
To hurt a child and not even apologize.
I thought Elizabeth was rude and selfish for just standing there without apologizing. But I was about to learn that wasn't the case. What? Scarlett's dad is Kevin's subordinate? After Abigail went to bed, I reported the evening's events to my husband, along with Richard. It was then, from Richard and my husband, that I heard the true story. According to Richard, the realization that Scarlett's dad was my husband's subordinate came from a casual conversation at a school event. But thinking it would be awkward to bring it up, he decided to let it go. Dad's job and me are entirely separate. But when it comes to Abigail, it's a different story. A few nights before, after seeing Abigail in tears, Richard told my husband about Scarlett's dad. The next day, my husband called Scarlett's dad to discuss what had happened. Scarlett's dad promptly checked the facts with Elizabeth and Scarlett. And upon finding out my husband's story was true, he rushed to finish his work and came to our house to apologize.
So that's why Elizabeth was glaring. But it turns out she's decent after all.
He's very serious and trustworthy, both in his work and character. Maybe even too serious. We'll have to support him, as it might get tough from here on. Just as my husband had secretly predicted, Elizabeth and her husband ended up divorcing soon after. However, since Elizabeth was a housewife,
If you want a divorce, you'll need to ensure my lifestyle. And I'll never give up Scarlett's custody. I need $5,000 a month for living and child support. If you can't pay, no divorce.
she demanded unreasonable conditions. Scarlett's dad consulted a lawyer and began gathering evidence to make the divorce favorable for him. It then came to light that Elizabeth had been cheating with a man she met on a dating app. Elizabeth was obsessed with her affair partner, but suddenly, she could no longer contact him. After being blocked from messaging and calls, Elizabeth was always irritated. And that irritation gradually turned into excessive expectations for Scarlett.
You have to be the best at lessons and school. If you fail, there will be consequences.
Scarlett worked hard and diligently met Elizabeth's expectations. Yet, Elizabeth continued to punish her for unreasonable reasons regularly. This was officially recognized, and Scarlett's custody was granted to her dad. He even demanded compensation for the affair, and Elizabeth, now working part-time, is struggling to pay it. After this event, a pleasant change occurred in our home. Abigail, who previously only had my husband and me to play with after school, now had a playmate. And that was Scarlett. To be honest, I didn't have a very good image of Scarlett. But after the divorce was finalized and she was freed from Mom's control, Scarlett turned out to be a very kind and considerate child. Above all, Abigail's joyful smile when playing with Scarlett said everything. Since then, Abigail and Scarlett have been playing together almost every day. I am now very happy to see Abigail's smile every day, something I've always wished for. And I plan to continue pouring unwavering love into Abigail, hoping this happiness lasts forever.
You're the reason Mom took her own life. I want a divorce right now.
I was dumbfounded when I suddenly received an angry call from my husband while having lunch outside.
Actually, I'm having lunch with your mother right now. What?
My husband said so and immediately hung up. Puzzled about why he said such a thing, I tilted my head in confusion along with my mother-in-law. However, after learning his motives, I decided to stand up and thoroughly confront him. My name is Mary, and I'm 28 years old. I've been married to my husband Daniel, who's 2 years my senior, for 3 years now. While supporting my husband who works as a company president, I also started working from home to help with the household finances. But it seems Daniel wasn't too happy about me working. You don't need to work, you know. That wasn't a word of appreciation for me trying to balance housework and a job.
It'll look like I'm not earning enough if my wife has to work.
I was disappointed with my husband who cared only about his own appearance. But to that, I was often uplifted by my mother-in-law, Susan.
It's commendable that you're working from home on your own terms.
And she often invited me out for lunch. I loved Susan, and despite how I felt about my husband, I was content with my life.
Maybe I've been too lenient with Daniel.
One day, while chatting in a cafe with Susan, she sighed.
I spoiled him as an only child, but lately, he's been asking for money frequently. He says it's for the company, but it seems suspicious. I had no idea. Daniel never mentioned anything like that to me.
But knowing my husband who likes to show off, Even if the company was in trouble, he probably wouldn't tell me until it was too late.
I sometimes regret how I raised my child. I worry if I've been a burden to you, Mary, and it keeps me up at night. Susan, you've done nothing wrong. No matter how hard you try in parenting, it ultimately depends on the child. I might not be convincing since I don't have any kids, but... No, Mary, I feel so relieved that you're trying to cheer me up. Thank you, as always.
Seeing Susan's gentle smile, I strongly felt that no matter what happens, I'll always stand by her side. Perhaps disliking my connection with Susan, my husband gradually started to harass me more.
What's with today's lunch? Strawberry jam on a sandwich? What? Isn't it your favorite? I only accept blueberry jam. Strawberry is too common and poor-looking for my taste.
Daniel came home, yelling, and threw the lunchbox into the trash can. How could you?
That lunchbox is getting old too. Buy a new one, will you?
As he stomped into his room, a sweet perfume scent wafted from him.
Daniel, you've been wearing that scent a lot lately.
However, when I cleaned his room, there was no perfume bottle, and I suspected it might be a woman's fragrance. And then, without any notice, he started coming home late more frequently.
Hey, I put extra effort into dinner today and waited for you. Didn't you get my message?
Yeah, I know.
But no matter how hard you try, your cooking can't beat a one-star hotel's.
What? Did you eat out on purpose?
Daniel, you've been acting strange lately. What? Shut up. Move, you're in the way.
He shouted, pushing me aside and walking to the bathroom. That's when I caught that perfume scent again.
I don't want to think about it, but it's clearly a sign of cheating.
I was restless, and soon Daniel even started bad-mouthing Susan.
That old lady, she should just give me the money without lecturing. Acting all high and mighty. Look who's talking. How can you ask Susan for money? That's none of your business.
He seemed irritated and kicked the trash can to intimidate me.
And usually, wives and mother-in-laws don't get along. It's not supposed to be that way. But Susan is such a good person. I have no reason to dislike her.
My husband clicked his tongue in annoyance at my response. Then, Daniel started badgering me about Susan.
Mom was complaining about you again. Says she hates going out with you because you're an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. No way! Susan would never say that.
Considering my relationship with Susan so far, I couldn't believe Daniel's words.
You really are naive. Why would she reveal her true feelings to a daughter-in-law like you? She's just been tolerating you.
Watching my husband's exasperated expression, I began to worry if it might be true. Moreover, he told me Susan didn't want to see me and asked me not to contact her. I intended to trust Susan, but I thought it best to lay low for a while.
Oh, right. Mom asked me to give you something. What is it?
But when I looked inside the box Daniel handed me, it was rotten and emitted a terrible smell. I grimaced. The expiration date on the back was a month old. They were perishables.
Wow, this is bad. Mom really hates you, doesn't she?
My husband looked maliciously pleased. During this time, the perfume scent only grew stronger, and I endured a hellish 3 months. One day, unable to bear it anymore, I decided to call Susan.
Tomorrow, I'll finish work by noon.
Would you like to meet up?
I'd like to have lunch and talk a bit.
Yes, that's fine, but are you sure you want to see me?
What do you mean?
I only understood the meaning behind Susan's words when we met the next day in a private room at a restaurant. It turns out my husband had also lied to Susan, telling her I'd been speaking ill of her. Of course, the story about Susan complaining about me was also a lie by my husband.
I thought so too. But I was worried maybe it was true. These past 3 months have felt like I was dead inside. I also thought there's no way you would say such things, but just in case it was true, I was avoiding going out with you. So what's with the rotten perishables? What? What are you talking about?
Seeing Susan tilt her head in confusion, I realized that was also a lie by Daniel. While Susan and I, feeling distrustful towards Daniel, were discussing our next steps over lunch, my phone rang.
Huh? It's Daniel.
I excused myself to Susan and answered the call, only to be yelled at by my husband.
It's your fault.
What? Why are you yelling at me all of a sudden?
You bullied Mom into taking her own life. I want a divorce from you right now.
Confused by Daniel's words, I was stunned.
Actually, I'm having lunch with your mother right now. What?
Surprised, my husband immediately hung up.
What was that about? What happened?
Before we could even ponder, Susan received a call.
Hello? Oh, Daniel? What's up?
Susan quickly switched her phone to speaker mode. On the other end, my husband's voice lowered, as if he was trying to find out something.
Mom, are you with someone right now?
To that, Susan winked at me and responded.
Oh, I'm just out shopping with a friend. Is something wrong?
Hearing this, my husband muttered.
She lied, that liar.
Then, he blurted out something outrageous.
Mary is cheating. You know what? I'm divorcing her, so you must never trust her again. What?
I gestured to Susan to keep talking. Quietly nodding, she pretended to be fooled and continued to draw out my husband's motives. Finally, the reason behind Daniel's suspicious behavior became clear. After ending the call with my husband, Susan's face looked devilish. I was filled with anger too.
Susan, let's teach that man a lesson together.
When I got home, my husband was already there.
Oh, you're home early today. Yeah.
Despite his inner tension, Daniel's attempt to appear calm was almost comical. But I decided to take the initiative.
Today, I got a weird call around noon. It might be my imagination, but the voice sounded like yours. Is it some new scam or something? What? Really? Be careful not to get fooled, okay?
Hearing my words, my husband seemed relieved, thinking he'd gotten away with it, and reverted to his usual demeanor.
Where were you anyways? If you're a housewife, you should act like one and stick to house chores. Okay, I hear you.
Then the doorbell rang.
I'm doing the dishes, could you get the door, Daniel?
Fine. Reluctantly, he opened the door and I heard him scream. Standing there was Susan and another young woman.
Emily! What are you doing here? Oh, I just invited your new bride over as a mother. She's young and cute, isn't she? Mom, don't say anything.
Daniel gestured for Susan to be quiet, but I watched from behind with a cold gaze.
I'm sorry to say this, but both Susan and I know about your affair.
I watched Daniel gasp.
Please, come in.
He welcomed the woman named Emily.
How long have you known?
Sitting across from us, Daniel looked up with a fearful gaze.
Daniel, every time you came home, you smelled of perfume. Didn't you notice? Or is there something wrong with your nose?
Tired of feeling uneasy, I decided to investigate my husband's mistress. Disguising my hair and outfit, I frequented a cafe near his office and followed him and his mistress to a hotel, capturing the moment they entered. I was so excited that I couldn't sleep that night.
How did you find her contact information? You thought you were careful by setting your phone's lock to fingerprint recognition, but that's easy to bypass when you're asleep.
Don't I have any privacy?
Be quiet.
Susan, usually calm and gentle, raised her voice, silencing her son.
So, I contacted Emily, and Susan went to pick her up.
I forced my husband's chin up as he sat with his head down. He couldn't move, just looking into my eyes.
You mentioned your intentions over the phone to Susan, but could you share them with me too?
I intended to smile, but perhaps my eyes weren't smiling, as my husband trembled. Reluctantly, he began to explain his suspicious behavior and the purpose of his call that day.
I plan to divorce you, take the alimony and shared property,
and then remarry Emily.
So, initially, you intended to make it look like Susan took her own life and blame me for it, leading to a divorce. Is that correct?
He nodded in small movements. It's surprising he thought such a lie about Susan's death would work. I guess he was that into his mistress. But when I told him I was having lunch with Susan, he was so caught off guard that he hung up the phone in shock. Still unrepentant, my husband, thinking of his next move, quickly contacted Susan.
When Daniel came to me with his plan, I was utterly disappointed.
Susan pretended to be deceived and extracted the story from him.
Mary cheated, so I'll take the compensation money and the shared property.
That's what he told Susan. And he added the following.
I've already found a new partner to marry as soon as we divorce.
That partner turned out to be Emily, now sitting in front of us, pale-faced.
Why won't you take my side?
What do you mean?
You always supported me. In elementary school, you always defended me when I did something wrong. But you changed ever since I married Mary. How far back are you living in the past? And I regret spoiling you too much when you were young.
Daniel thought that his mother had changed because of me, and had been lying to both of us so we wouldn't see each other. Disappointed with her son, Susan sighed deeply.
I never thought you could be so selfish. I'll end it here. I'm cutting off your financial support. What? You're kidding, right?
Actually, Susan had been financially supporting Daniel's company, and his success as a president was largely due to her. However, after becoming suspicious of his constant requests for money, Susan discovered he was using the funds for his mistress and not the company.
I no longer consider you my son. I'm disowning you, so leave this house.
Daniel's face turned increasingly pale. It was only natural, since the house we lived in was in Susan's name, and he had always relied on his mother. Seeing him look at me in panic, I pushed the divorce papers towards him.
Sign here, please. Here's a pen. Enjoy your life with your mistress as much as you want. At least let me off the compensation money. Don't joke with me. How dare you claim Susan took her own life?
I said so and slapped his face.
What? If there's no money, there's no benefit to marrying an old man like you.
The mistress said so and slapped his face too. Daniel, holding his face, teared up and collapsed on the floor.
By the way, Emily, I'll be seeking compensation from you too. What? Why me? You can't just meddle with someone's husband and get away scot-free.
But she too slumped powerlessly to the floor, and together, Susan and I kicked both the Daniel and Emily out into the cold. After divorcing my husband, I demanded $20,000 in compensation. He was kicked out of the house owned by Susan, his financial support was cut off, and his company went bankrupt. Now homeless and penniless, Daniel is apparently living on the streets. Of course, I also got $10,000 in compensation from the mistress. Susan and I remain close, and after my divorce, I moved in with her. Our bond deepened even more. And we now live freely and happily together, just the two of us. I will be erased soon. A letter from my sister-in-law Elizabeth, who had taken her own life, arrived addressed to me. It came a week after she had passed to the other side. Despite her will already being found, what on earth was going on? I couldn't understand it all. But when I saw that letter, my hands started shaking with anger.
This can't be forgiven.
The letter ended with the words, "Report to police immediately." Little did I know what would happen next. My name is Jessica, I'm 28 years old. I live with my husband Paul, who is 5 years older than me. Both of us worked at different companies. Paul had a sister named Elizabeth, a very gentle person who, and for me who had no sisters, was like a real sister. And Elizabeth treated me like a sister as well. My sister-in-law was unmarried, and said she had no boyfriend, but she confided in me alone.
Actually, there's someone I've been interested in lately. He's a wrestler and is very strong.
Elizabeth said with a happy smile. And this was a secret kept between just us. My father-in-law was a practicing doctor, but passed away due to illness 3 months ago, and after that, Elizabeth started living with my mother-in-law. But then, my mother-in-law also passed to the other side. The cause was due to an overdose of medication, likely obtained from my father-in-law's clinic. After my father-in-law passed away, they were considering closing the clinic since my parents-in-law were known as a loving couple to everyone. The will created on the computer mentioned my mother-in-law couldn't bear my father-in-law's death. But my mother-in-law was a person who always enjoyed writing and had a beautiful handwriting as well. So I felt it was odd that her last message to this world wasn't handwritten. But my husband simply accepted it.
She chose to go to the other side, so it's not strange she did something different. She must have been that lonely.
Indeed, thinking of my mother-in-law's immense sorrow for the love of my father-in-law, I oddly found myself agreeing with Paul. But, amidst such interference, there was a mountain of things left to do. Because my mother-in-law had hardly touched anything inherited from my father-in-law, she had left behind a vast fortune. Paul would find time to immerse himself in the inheritance procedures. In contrast, my sister-in-law began sorting through my mother-in-law's belongings, one by one. And from this time, I started to notice a change in Paul's behavior. When he's home, he would stay in his room, and when he had work, he would come home late. And then finally, he started frequently coming home in the morning without telling me at all.
"You've been acting strange lately. What on earth are you doing?" "It's none of your business." "But your mother just passed away, and you're not coming home until morning." "Shut up. Don't preach to me."
My husband stormed out the door and became unreachable, not returning until the next evening. Given the gravity of our marital crisis, I confided in my sister-in-law about the situation with him.
"I'll subtly ask Paul what's been happening. Let's work together and resolve this."
Her encouragement somehow bolstered my spirits. Yet, what followed was unimaginable. The very next day, my sister-in-law suddenly left this world. The cause was the same as my mother-in-law's, an overdose. And she too had left a note.
"I will join my beloved mother on her journey."
But the idea that Elizabeth, who had been so positive just days before, taking her own life made no sense to me.
"Something is definitely wrong. Let's get the police to investigate. Making a fuss won't bring Elizabeth back. You just do what you're supposed to do quietly."
Despite my inability to accept, the funeral wouldn't wait. With a heart full of sorrow and unresolved feelings, I proceeded to make the arrangements. After Elizabeth's funeral, exactly 1 week later, I was set to return to work. Arriving at the office, there was an envelope on my desk. It seemed to have arrived while I was away.
"Who could it be from? What? This can't be."
I was shocked to see the sender's name. It was a letter from Elizabeth, who had passed away. Panicked, I opened it.
"I will be erased soon. Report to the police immediately."
This sentence caught my eye. And as I continued to read, my hands began to tremble.
"The hidden truth. I can't believe this."
Gradually, I felt a strong anger building inside me, my head heating up. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I resolved to put an end to it myself. But I still lacked the crucial piece to do so. Thus, I sent a letter to someone, quietly waiting for the right time. 2 nights later, I visited my parents-in-law's home and hid myself. Then, a dark figure quietly entered my sister-in-law's room. I followed the dark figure and then turned on the light.
"It's so bright."
The person rummaging through Elizabeth's desk was none other than my husband, Paul.
"What are you doing here? And in the dark, too. It's as if you're searching for something, hoping not to be found. Don't say something stupid. What are you doing here yourself?"
As if I was the one doing something wrong, he pointed his finger at me. Ignoring my husband, I pulled out something I had prepared from my bag.
"Did you happen to read this letter?"
It was a letter I had written, pretending to be my sister-in-law, addressed to myself to arrive at our house. It read,
"Inside my desk, there is evidence of my brother's crime. Jessica, take this and report to the police."
I had anticipated my quick-thinking husband would guess a letter from my sister-in-law contained something serious and would read it without permission.
"Seeing this, you came to destroy the evidence, but unfortunately, what's written here was a fake I created to lure you in." "What are you talking about?" "I was just cleaning up." "Really? Then can you say the same after seeing this?"
I took out the letter I had received from my sister-in-law a few days ago.
"Elizabeth knew you were responsible for sending your mother to the other side. That's why she pressured you to turn yourself in, right? But you took care of her too."
Hearing these words, my husband instantly turned his face away. I pressed on, presenting the content of the letter to Paul.
"While sorting through things, Elizabeth found your mother's diary. It seems to say you jumped on some shady investment." "So what?" "That's something I have no recollection of." "Lies. It's all written here."
I took out the diary my sister-in-law had enclosed in the letter. According to it, Paul had been pestering her to invest the family's fortune. Despite her refusals, he was persistent, causing her great distress. Unable to confide in anyone, my mother-in-law poured her anguished heart into the diary.
"Look here. As long as I'm in my right mind, I'll never let the fortune my husband left to be used for such dubious purposes. I want to live long, for the both of us. It says so, right?"
"So what if it does?"
"The evidence here made Elizabeth realize you must have been the one to end your mother's life."
However, no matter how much my Elizabeth searched, she couldn't find definitive proof you sent my mother-in-law to the other side. As a last resort, Elizabeth tried to get a confession out of Paul. But my sister-in-law thought, being capable of such acts towards his own mother, he might not spare her either. If anything happened to her, she entrusted me through the letter to report my husband to the police.
Hey, all of that is just made-up stories. After all, there's no conclusive evidence I sent those two to the other side, is there? You rummaging through Elizabeth's belongings right now is evidence enough. Calm down, will you?"
Saying this, my husband left the room and returned with coffee he had brewed in the kitchen.
"Here, drink this and calm down."
Paul offered the coffee with a nonchalant demeanor. But this was exactly my aim.
"Surely you've mixed something strange in large amounts in this."
Indeed, no decisive evidence of his crimes was found as my husband said. However, it was almost certain Paul was responsible for their deaths. And the deciding factor for my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's journey to the other side was medication.
"I figured if I made enough noise, you'd surely try to do the same to me too. If you handed me a drink or something, I thought it would surely contain something suspicious, becoming irrefutable evidence."
My husband, clearly unsettled by my deductions, clicked his tongue.
"Basically, you jumped at that get-rich-quick scheme because you were squandering money on a woman, right?"
I had long suspected our marriage had grown cold and wondered if Paul was having an affair. Since a lot had been going on regarding my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I had left it alone, but now I decided to thoroughly investigate Paul's background. Then, I found an unknown credit card in his room and discovered a history of purchases of expensive women's brand items on the statement.
"And I found this as well."
I pulled out a club hostess's business card I found in the inner pocket of his suit.
"I went to the club and met the woman named on this card." "What? You met Nancy?" "Since she wasn't looking for any trouble, she told me everything just like that. She said you two were already in a relationship."
According to Nancy, Paul was the one who persistently approached her. However, for her, Paul was just a good target, entering into the relationship only to get money from him. Knowing Paul was married, Nancy demanded compensation from him, which he complied with.
"But she's been feeling bothered by you for a while. She said she was going to change clubs to cut ties with you."
"Too bad."
"What? But I spent so much on her."
Tears welled up in Paul's eyes as he hung his head. Paul, infatuated with another woman, was now depressed because his affair partner dumped him.
How dare you act like this in front of your wife?
I couldn't help but feel another wave of anger. Then suddenly, Paul lunged at me.
Give me the coffee.
He tried to snatch the coffee, which likely contained a large amount of medication and could serve as evidence of his crime.
Stop it. Let go. Just give it to me.
I struggled fiercely, but the difference in strength meant it was only a matter of time before the evidence ended up in his hands. But then, someone intervened to help.
Get your hands off her.
Easily knocking Paul down and pinning him to the floor.
Who on earth are you?
He's Richard, the man Elizabeth loved. He worked at the same place as my sister-in-law and had attended Elizabeth's funeral. Before Elizabeth passed away, she had mentioned about Richard.
There's a wonderful man with a wrestling background.
Seeing Richard, a solidly built man, holding back tears in front of Elizabeth lying in peace, I instantly knew he was the man my sister-in-law had loved. Approaching him, he opened up about his feelings for Elizabeth. Richard, too, couldn't believe my sister-in-law had taken her own life, and we exchanged contact information, promising to share any new information.
In order to carry out this plan, I had asked him to hide just in case. Damn it! You tricked me.
My husband struggled, and with my help, the two of us managed to subdue him. Thinking he couldn't escape, Paul suddenly changed his tune. Look, Richard, can't we talk this out?
If you let me go now, I might even share a bit of my family's wealth with you. You open your mouth and that's what you suggest?
Jessica, you too. You know your husband could be criticized by society.
Appalling. Did you really think I'd stay by your side for life? You really are full of yourself. You and I are over.
When I mentioned breaking up, my husband's face turned pale.
What? I'm going to be abandoned by my wife and get locked up? No, I don't want that.
Paul struggled fiercely again, but Richard restrained him. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Never. You took the lives of your own mother and sister.
Thinking of the two who had gone to heaven, I couldn't let Paul get away with this. I clenched my fists and glared at my husband.
You're the worst kind of human being. I will never forgive you, Paul. Serve your time quietly behind bars. Just be prepared never to see the outside world again. My life is over.
Crying out, my husband was immobilized by me and Richard. We then called the police, and soon after, officers arrived and took him away. Paul was later interrogated and seems to have confessed. A large amount of medication was detected in the coffee, sealing his fate. Aware of the severity of his crimes, he seemed to have resigned himself to his fate, losing all energy in life. As for myself, I divorced Paul and demanded a compensation of $30,000 from him and $10,000 from Nancy. And as for Richard, he said he is going to move on with his life. After all the procedures were completed, I moved to a new home, ready for a fresh start. I've been assigned new tasks at work, and despite the challenges, I feel the most fulfilled I've ever been.
You always look beautiful. Today, too. You're nothing like my wife. I wish I could marry you soon.
It was in the middle of the night when I woke up to go to the bathroom. I heard a surprising conversation from the living room.
I'd also prefer a beautiful mom. I'd be happy that it could happen.
Apparently, my husband and son were on a video call with someone. From the conversation, it seemed likely that it was my husband's mistress, and shockingly, my son was also talking with the woman.
What in the world is going on?
After all the times they've ignored me, to do something like this. For the past month, I've been treated as if I didn't exist by the two of them. Ignored completely, even when I spoke right in front of them, and on top of that, the meals I cooked were thrown in the trash. I felt my heart turning cold.
And so, I vowed to get my revenge.
My name is Lucy, a 39-year-old housewife. My husband Albert is a 45-year-old office worker, and our son Frederick is a 14-year-old middle school student. Our family was just an ordinary, average one, living happily together. Albert had an average income for his age and a normal look. But he was a very kind man. Our son, in the 8th grade, was in his rebellious phase, not listening to me, but I still adored him as my sweet boy. I worked hard as a housewife, doing everything all I could to support our family. However, our peaceful happiness shattered suddenly one day. It all started a month ago.
Frederick, dinner's ready.
One evening, I called out to my son, but he completely ignored me. Well, it's just a teenage behavior, I thought. At that time, I didn't care much.
I'll leave them there in plastic wrap.
I just said that and left it alone. But I noticed something was off when my husband came home.
Welcome back. Dinner's ready.
I called out my husband, but he also ignored me. Then, my son came out of his room, running up to my husband.
Dad, welcome back. Did you buy dinner? Yeah, your favorite burgers. Awesome. Meat's the best, right?
Then, my husband and son threw the dinner I made, with the plates, into the trash.
What the heck? What are you doing?
Ignoring me completely, they began eating the burgers from the grocery store which they had spread on the table.
Why have you been ignoring me all this time?
I asked for a reason, but both my husband and son just silently ate their burgers, as if they couldn't hear me. I felt like I had become invisible. After finishing, they returned to their rooms, leaving the mess behind. Crying, I picked up the plates from the trash can. I ended up throwing away the burger trashes they left behind. Since that day, for a whole month, I was treated as if I was non-existent. No matter what I said or did, it was as if I was invisible to them. From about a week later, I gave up and started making meals just for myself. My parents are farmers and they send fresh, delicious vegetables to our house. I used these vegetables to make meals, thinking of my family's health, but it was unbearable to see them thrown away uneaten every day. Eventually, even the meals I made for myself got thrown away by them when I wasn't looking. There was even a time when they deliberately crushed the fresh vegetables which my parents sent right in front of me.
This is kind of a stress reliever, huh? Why are you doing this? Did I do something wrong? Tell me and I'll fix it.
They continued to stomp on the vegetables, laughing mockingly, as if they couldn't see me no matter how much I cried and screamed. Then, my husband did something unbelievable. This one too, no need for it anymore, I'll throw it away.
It wouldn't fetch much even if I sold it.
He took off his wedding ring from his left ring finger and threw it into the trash can. It was supposed to be the symbol of our precious bond. That was the last straw for me, and I shut my heart down. I couldn't believe he would go as far as to throw away our wedding ring. What is he thinking? My sadness and anger finally reached the limit. I secluded myself in my room. From behind my room's door, I could hear my husband and son laughing together, which only deepened my sorrow. Why did things turn out this way? What happened to them? Confused and distressed, I spent a month crying alone in my room. One late night, while walking to the bathroom, I overheard a joyful conversation of my husband and my son from the living room. I felt lonely, knowing I was no longer part of their world. But then, they started a video call with someone, and the conversation that ensued was unbelievable.
Sophie, you look beautiful today, too. You're nothing like my wife. I wish I could marry you soon. Really? Ditch that wrinkled and spotted woman fast and marry Sophie. I'd be so happy to have such a beautiful mom.
I couldn't hear the other person's voice, but my husband and son were praising someone over the phone.
Mother? What are they talking about? It was unbelievable.
From their conversation, it was clear my husband was having an affair, and my son knew and was encouraging it. Their terrible conversation continued.
Lucy really is a foolish woman, isn't she? Now that she's shut herself in her room, we don't have to see her wrinkled, spotted face, which is such a relief.
It's hilarious. She really seems to know we can't see her. They were mocking me. I felt my heart was freezing. I knew my husband was working hard but was being passed over for promotion at work. I believed my son was just being rebellious because of his age. That's why I had been patient until now.
But this was too much. What was my endurance for? Knowing the truth ignited the anger that had been smoldering inside me. I couldn't forgive this, not even because they were family. At that moment, I decided to take revenge.
For the next 2 months, I researched my husband's mistress, waiting for the right moment for revenge. Then, one day, my husband approached me. "Hey, I need to talk to you."
"Oh, it's been a while since you came to talk to me."
"Are you done ignoring me?"
"Yeah, you're of no use to me anymore."
My husband handed me divorce papers with a nasty smile. And my son was grinning beside him.
"I've found someone else."
"Leave this house." I took the divorce papers from the table with no expression.
"Fine,"
I answered. They were surprised, as if they didn't expect my agreement. "Huh? You know things very well. We could have divorced sooner then? I had a feeling it would come to this." "I already packed. I'll leave tomorrow morning." "Oh, okay. Anything else you want to say?" "What do you want me to say? Beg you not to throw me away?"
"No, just sign the divorce papers."
My husband seemed a bit let down, but I didn't care and signed the papers, returning them to him. They probably didn't expect that things wouldn't go so smoothly. They looked at each other, but then laughed, as if it was fine as long as I agreed to the divorce.
I wonder how long their smug smiles will last. They had no idea that hell was waiting for them after this. The only one who knew it at this point was me. I was laughing inside myself.
The next day, I packed my bags and decided to go back to my parents' house.
"Then, thank you for everything up to now."
"You really don't regret it?" "I can reconsider if you want."
"Why?"
"You're the one who wanted a divorce, right? Did you think I'd be crying and begging you to stay?"
"What did you say?" "Dad, it's fine. We won't be troubled without a woman like her." "That's true. She's a woman who no longer matters to us."
My husband seemed to have mixed feelings about me agreeing so easily to the divorce. But that was no longer of my business. The husband I loved had already changed. The husband I knew before would never have treated me like I didn't exist or laughed in such an unpleasant way. I felt the last 15 years of our marriage were in vain.
"Goodbye.
Please take care. What happens to them after this has nothing to do with me." After all, my husband himself said that I no longer mattered to them. Upon my return to my parents' home, they welcomed me warmly.
"Dad, Mom, I'm sorry. The vegetables you sent were either thrown away or trampled on by my husband and son, and they all went to waste. I truly felt sorry for not being able to appreciate my parents' kindness. Wasting food brings punishment. I've seen plenty of people like them suffering."
My father was concerned about the scars of my heart. Feeling the warmth of my parents after a long time, I couldn't stop my tears. Meanwhile, the hell for my ex-husband and son was just beginning. Within a week of our divorce and returning to my parents' house, my ex-husband and son came rushing to our doorstep. The moment they saw my face as I opened the door, they started making a scene.
"Lucy, help us! We were deceived. That's what I told you, Dad. It was suspicious." "No, you never said that. You were happy about getting a beautiful mother instead of Lucy."
Hearing their ugly quarrel, I managed to keep from laughing and responded calmly.
"What? You just realized? Shouldn't it have been obvious? You're really foolish. You knew about it?" "Of course. Sophie, right? There's no way a woman that beautiful would be interested in a man like you."
My ex-husband gasped in surprise. Sophie was my husband's mistress. He was quite shocked that I knew what Sophie looked like. Actually, after hearing their conversation in the living room, I sneaked out of my room while they were sleeping and checked my ex-husband's phone, which was charging in the living room. The phone was locked, probably as a precaution, but I knew he used his birthday as the password, so it was easy to open. I was astounded by his lack of security awareness and how he underestimated me, thinking I wouldn't know his birthday. Well, anyways, I opened his text messages and found a lot of exchanges between him and Sophie, like a couple in love. Just thinking about it now makes me nauseous. But Sophie's profile picture was too beautiful to be true. She has exotic features on her face, so beautiful that she could be an idol or a celebrity. No, it was definitely suspicious. There was no reason for such a beautiful woman to be attracted to an average man like him. So, I did an image search with Sophie's photo. Nowadays, you can search the internet using photos, not just keywords. That's when a shocking truth came to light.
That's Sophie, she's actually a middle-aged man, just like you.
There was a warning posted on the internet about a marriage scam artist. Just to be sure, I asked a police officer friend from my school days, and it turned out to be true. Even a famous manga artist got caught in this kind of scam and lost $750,000.
No way! I did a video call with her. It was definitely that beautiful woman.
My husband was desperately trying to deny it, seemingly unwilling to believe. My son, too, was dumbfounded, thinking it couldn't be a scam.
But suddenly, we couldn't get in touch anymore just as we were about to get married. She ran off with our money. Oh, you donated quite a lot, didn't you? I believed that beautiful woman was going to be my mom. We even talked through video calls. But nowadays, even in video calls, with software, a man can pretend to be a woman. Did you know?
These days, gender transformation tools can change one's gender and appearance in calls, making them look like a completely different person. The voice can be easily altered from male to female, and the facial expressions change during the conversation, so it's hard to tell it's fake. It's truly a terrifying era.
No way! My Sophie is a middle-aged man? When I saw Sophie's real face on the internet, I laughed so hard at the difference. Horrible, Mom! You knew and still abandoned us? I lost my savings too.
Horrible? Have you already forgotten what you have done to me? Listening to them act as if they were the victims, all I could do was shaking my head. Ignoring me as if I didn't exist, not responding when I spoke to you, throwing away the meals I made. At the end, you chose to divorce. You were the ones who went away first. Never call me Mom again. What? You're still mad? I'm sorry, let's make up. We're family, right? We're strangers now. So I don't care. This is the end you chose. Take responsibility for your own choices. When I rejected them, my son begged even more. Don't say that. I'm your son, right? Help me, at least.
What? That's not fair, Frederick. Trying to save yourself? It's Dad's fault for being tricked in the first place. There's a good investment, we'll share the profits, how could you not suspect that? You were happy to become rich and handed over all your savings too.
I was tired of hearing their endless and unpleasant bickering. Our family was destroyed by a single scam artist. If my ex-husband hadn't cheated, maybe we would still be a happy family now. But it's too late.
It's a waste of time. Can you leave?
As I tried to close the front door, my ex-husband begged me.
Wait! Please, let's start over. Your parents are farmers, right? So even if we have no money, we won't starve.
Are you saying you want to reconcile with me for food?
No, it's not like that. I need you. I know it too late, but forgive me. I won't do it again.
His obvious excuses only made me sigh. Such men will surely repeat the same mistakes. I decided to put an end to it.
Wasting food brings punishment. I've seen many like you suffering.
What are you talking about all of a sudden?
It's my parents' teaching. You threw away the vegetables they lovingly grew without even eating them. Understand? I'm angry. I will never forgive you. Don't ever show your face to me again.
With that, I closed the door.
Wait! Mom, forgive me!
They kept making a scene at the front door, causing a neighborhood disturbance, so I called the police to take them away. Later, I heard that my ex-husband lost all his money and was fired for embezzling company funds. My son dropped out of high school and is working, but he can't find a good job. The marriage scam artist was recently arrested, according to the news. He was a middle-aged man, nothing like the beautiful woman, and many men were deceived on social media. As for me, I'm helping out on my parents' farm, living a stress-free and healthy life. I'm soon going to be introduced to a man of my age who's also a farmer in the same area. Next time, I want to build a happy family.